So now we're looking essentially at the master plan
We have
and the land use element.
amendment to the land use plan element of the master plan. And
And
public hearings.
right. Do you want to walk us through some of that language first, or do you want to just?
I should probably just give a brief overview and then address board questions, and then, Mr. Chairman, we should
We open it up to the
public hearing.
You just swear your head, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your name and address?
Paul Phillips. I'm the board, planning board chairman. So, you should have in front of you, or should have reviewed, an amendment to the land use plan element of the Township of Morris Master Plan. It's specifically prepared for block 10401, lot 3. Looks correct? Correct. So what I'm going to do is just briefly go through the document, and you can follow along with me if you so choose, but essentially there's an overview on page 1 which discusses the planning framework for the amendment. And essentially the amendment on that block and lot, which as you all are well aware is the former Colgate property, would change the land use classification in the master plan. Currently, the land use classification is consistent with the zoning classification, which is a split between I-21 industrial and OSGU, which is open space governmental use. And this amendment would establish a new mixed-use, retail, commercial, residential, and open space redevelopment plan designation for this property. We basically, also page 1, describe the property. I think the board and the public is familiar with the property. It is just under 50 acres along East Hanover Avenue. It has access from Martin Luther King Avenue as well as from the Menin Access Road. Some of the adjacent properties are described on page 2. I'm not going to go into detail. If there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Also on page 2, we just deal with the property history and former uses. Everyone also is aware that I guess beginning in the 50s, it was the headquarters of the Menin Company, and then Colgate, I think in the 90s acquired Menin for the Colgate manufacturing plant until 2016, when the late 2016 when the plant was fully vacated. There are some exhibits in the document showing an aerial of the property as well as a locational context. And then we briefly describe, just for informational purposes, on pages 6 through 8, the current zoning designation, which mirrors the land use plan designation in the master plan. We just show what is currently permitted in the I-21, which is basically an industrial district, and the OSGU district, which is, again, open space and governmental use. And that zoning map, the current zoning map, is also depicted on page 9. On page 10, basically gets into the land use plan element amendment itself, and it basically describes the rationale for the change in the land use classification. And again, the board, we're indicating the board is of the opinion that that existing designation is no longer appropriate in terms of the most appropriate land use scheme for the property in terms of both for locational reasons, as well as recognizing changes that have taken place in the marketplace, and also in light of what exists and some of the changes that have occurred on the adjoining properties, both in the Township of Morris as well as in adjoining communities. In sort of in the middle of that land use plan amendment rationale, we talk about the board determining that the front portion of the property along East Hanover Avenue should be developed for retail commercial uses consisting of both multi-store and freestanding structures. That given the fact that the rear of the property adjoins established residential areas in both Morris Township and Morristown, that a transitional use, including townhouses, would be the most appropriate use And we've also acknowledged that there would be an affordable housing component in order that the municipality seek to satisfy its constitutional mandate to provide its fair share of affordable housing. And that affordable housing would consist of a combination of a rental building as well as supportive housing, a group home. And that would go towards satisfying the affordable housing obligation on the entire site. The board is also determining that the existing multi-use recreational field should be relocated from its existing location to a more suitable location, but also on the Colgate property. And then lastly, the land use element is being done to ultimately incorporate a anticipated redevelopment plan amendment that would be put in place by the governing body, consistent with the requirements of the local redevelopment and housing law. And you're familiar with that because you made a recommendation to the governing body to place this property within a redevelopment area, determine that it met the criteria for that classification. And again, the changes would be necessary to affect the redevelopment plan, including changes to the zoning map. And that recommendation that the zoning map be changed is also part of this master plan amendment. If we go from the I-21 OSGU to a new mixed-use redevelopment area designation. Page 11, we talk about the various components and permitted uses. Again, I won't go into detail, but basically a mix of retail, commercial, and residential with associated open space. Recommended development standards, for example, on the retail, a maximum floor area ratio of 0.2, maximum residential density in the residential open space area of 6 dwelling units per acre in total, and that would include all forms of the housing that I just had described. There would be, we're recommending a series of additional comprehensive development and design standards be incorporated in the redevelopment plan. Affordable housing, a 20% set aside, we talked about. Site access and circulation, I mentioned the 2 primary access points to the property. We're also including a recommendation in this document that at the time a site plan approval is sought, that on the property, the planning board should require that certain of the adjoining intersections be studied and analyzed as part of that site plan, kind of similar to what we did with the Honeywell master plan amendment. And those, I guess it's about 4 key intersections are listed. And then lastly, a recommendation regarding speccing the multi-use recreational field in terms of dimensions that we would seek to be relocated on the property. Page 14 is just statutory requirements as to how this master plan amendment is consistent with the state plan. We believe it clearly is. This area is designated PA1, which is an area targeted for growth within the plan. Clearly, this master plan amendment is consistent with the state plan. And there are 2 adjoining communities. You have Hanover directly across the street, and this property actually abuts, actually a portion of the Colgate property is in the town of Morristown. Contiguous property about 5 acres, so we're required to look at the master plans in those communities for consistency, and we believe that this amendment is consistent, as Hanover has a IB3 master plan zoning district across the street, which recently was included to incorporate an option for large-scale retail development, and some of that has been realized in terms of development across the street. Certainly with retail commercial along Hanover Avenue, we believe that we're consistent with their master plan designation across the street. And similarly, the town of Morristown identifies the undeveloped portion of Colgate within Morristown as an area suitable for single family. So our transition from commercial to townhouses to single family in Morristown is perfectly acceptable and compatible from a land use standpoint. And then lastly, as part of this document, we also did this when we did the Honeywell Master Plan Amendment. We've listed what we believe are the benefits of this new land use classification, and as you look at them, they're basically, they mirror the objectives of the redevelopment plan, which came out of this planning board and is now before the governing body for consideration. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that gives you a summary of the document. I'd be happy to answer any board questions, and then you should open it to the public.
Other questions?
I have,
Yes,
one thing that's troubled me, Paul, is there's no roadway connection between retail, commercial, and residential. To me, it seems to me that it would be an advantage for both sides, the residential and the commercial, to have a roadway connection. Is there a reason of why you have that in there?
Yeah, and I understand the issue of the connection for convenience and keeping trips potentially off the road to get from one land use to another, and there is provision in the redevelopment plan for some pedestrian access between the two entities, but all else being equal, you really want to keep the commercial and residential traffic separate. It's really a threshold issue, and I understand the connectivity and not wanting to get traffic out on the road, but you really don't want to cut through from the commercial to the residential. You don't want commercial traffic to try and find a path of least resistance through the townhouse area. You really do, from a land use impact standpoint, want to keep that separate. So I understand the objective, but I think overall it's better to keep it separate for the reasons I articulated.
Okay. The other one was the limit of 60,000 square feet of footage for the commercial building. Maybe that isn't cast in concrete if somebody wants to build a anchor building of 100,000 square feet and has a good reason for it.
Well, I think the issue was that was done purposefully, because one of the considerations for the property was a big box store, 150,000 square feet. And I think the consensus was, and this includes the consensus of the governing body, that their hope was that this would be a more intimate center that wouldn't have large boxes that generated a lot of truck traffic, loading in the rear so close to the residential. We wanted there to be more sort of compatibility, and so the reason for the 60,000 is you'd not be able to do that big box store, which again the governing body did not want to do it from a land use policy standpoint, but it would give you the ability to attract sort of a niche. There's a variety of different food market types that aren't in the 70,000, 80,000 square foot range that are coming on the market now. It would enable a developer to attract that kind of user, as well as something like a fairly large health and fitness center would fit within that box as well. So this was the desire in terms of both the scale and the type of retail uses that the governing body wanted to attract.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board members? No? We could